Okay, you won't believe this. We're back here again at allpointstv.com, and we're very glad to see you out there. We see the numbers on the monitor here, and we're glad you're here. This is another Monday, and we're getting off to a good start here, hopefully, with our program, and hope you stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointstv.com. We're trying to bring some quality programs here at the studio, and we're trying to do something a little bit different than what they're doing in other places. I want to say this about some of the impacts that we're having. I think we can take credit for it. I saw a change in Mark Levine's format this past weekend, and I think that was because I saw a big change in it. Mark Levine has a good program. By and large, I like any program that talks about the Constitution and tries to skewer around what the law of the land is. So any program that's along that line, I kind of gravitate toward it, and that's what attracted me to Mark Levine's program. It now comes on twice a week, and I would ask you to tune it in. I think you'll enjoy some of the things that are said there. You can certainly learn something from it. But the format, I was criticizing the format. Mark Levine has a tendency to come on every time the same way. He spends the first 10 to 15 minutes of the program pontificating, and then they take a break and they come back. And after they come back, Mark Levine will introduce one of the two guests, and he'll do more talking than than the guests do. He has to learn how to release that microphone. If you're gonna have a guest, and people tuning in, they want to hear what the guests have to say. And Mark Levine can't shut it off. He starts off talking to begin his program, and then when the guest comes on, he continues to talk through the time the guest is on. But he changed it this past weekend. I think that's because we've been saying, I've been writing about it, and I've been saying it on this air, that he needs to understand why people tune in on his program. And it's a one of the few conservative shows on television, so that's something to be celebrated. You don't have a lot of it. The only station I think that is giving them any kind of competition along that line is Newsmax, and they better watch Newsmax, because Newsmax is coming up fast through the lane, on the outer lane coming through, and they're doing a lot of catch up. And if they're not careful, if they keep on firing, if they keep on firing all their stars, or the stars are just walking away, they're going to find themselves. I think it's not still the number one conservative stations out there, but I'm not putting my money on the horses in this race with what they have left over there. Sean Hannity is still there, and Waters, Jesse Waters, that's another one that's coming up through the rear, and he's doing pretty good. Mark Levine's program is another addition. I think it's a plus addition to the network. But Mark Levine has to understand that his format is important. And if you're going to bring guests on, then let the guests have the time. Ask the question and get out of the way, and let them do the answer. But Mark Levine just talks and talks and talks. And you wonder, why does he bring guests on that we can talk some more? Just if you want to do all the talking, do what we do here. When we bring guests on, we bring the guests on because we want you to hear what the guests have to say. And when we don't have guests, then we do the format. I saw a change in it. I think that may well be because I've been writing about it, and I think also we've been mentioning it on the air. And I don't think it's I can say that they're not listening to us. They don't mention us, but I can tell when we're being listened to, because there's evidence of it in what they do in their format. I want to say before I get started also one other thing. I just thought about something that happened this past week that's very consequential. I have to really congratulate Alan Dershowitz. I'm not a fan, but but he is in the legal realm, so I have to, pay attention to what he says. But I have to give him credit for what he did last week. Mark Levine did something great in terms of this format being changed. And then here's Alan Dershowitz, who did something I think is also a major move. Alan Dershowitz left the Democratic Party. And I kept wondering while I was listening to him and then watching what the Democratic Party was doing and watching them walking down two different roads as far as Israel is concerned. And I was wondering, how does he stay over there? His position being this and the Democratic Party being positioned something very different. I mean, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party. It's not just about they disagree with Israel's policy. They are against the continuation of the Jewish state. There's only one state in the world. There's a Jewish state, and that may well not be the case in the future, the way things are looking. But at least there was you would think there was this support for the Israeli state, but I'm not so sure that's even true anymore of the Democratic Party. These Kamala Harris refused to come down and meet with the Prime Minister of Israel when he was here.
Netanyahu?
Yeah, wouldn't meet with him and missed the discussion he had in front of the parliament, and that was a disgraceful thing. When the head of state comes in, then the leaders of the country are to be there for that. And it was very, very disgusting to treat a head of state, no matter what the politics are. You don't treat a head of state with that kind of disrespect because you're not just representing yourself and your own views. You represent the United States of America.
Well, did you see? I'd sent you the article. I don't know if you got a chance to read it. That Alan Dershowitz officially left the Democratic Party over their disrespect and their not doing the unwavering support of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And and he's been like a career. He's made his entire career tied to the Democratic Party. He considers himself independent. But I sent it to you. But that's a telling statement now. That's like the Republican Party might be picking up more Jewish voters in the United States with that kind of a.
I would think so, John. I'm surprised that the Jewish vote is a lockstep Democratic vote. That's just as historically that is just as it's not surprising, it's stunning. I think stunning is the word here. It's stunning that that would be the case because given the history, let's take Donald Trump as an example of that. Look at the history that you have in terms of the conservative support for Israel. And look at Donald Trump's demeanor. And if that didn't move some numbers, I don't know what will do it. I've been having a lot of discussion with blacks too about Donald Trump. You can't convince them that their condition was better. I don't know where they were during the 4 years of Trump's term, and where they were in the aftermath of that, where they are now. But it's undeniable that the country was in better state under Donald Trump's administration than it was under the previous administration, Barack Obama, and what it's been since Biden took office. You can't deny the numbers.
It's like I just drew up this analogy to see if it works. A lot of people who are like the shop workers I grew up with didn't like the GM management. They didn't like GM. It was us against them. But, they never looked at the fact that you don't have to be friends and you don't have to be allies to actually have mutual beneficial relationship off each other. And it was us against them, the shop workers against the management and all that. But who was it to give them the paycheck? It was through the management. So basically there's kind of animosity towards each other, but they needed each other. And that's what people don't understand. That it's like, you might not, Donald Trump is not somebody I would have wanted to be. Before he ran as president, I thought it was, when he announced he was going to run as president, I thought it was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Thought it was a joke for the first couple of months. But then when I saw the weeding out of the candidates and stuff for the Republican Party and him just standing alone, I went, okay, him, Hillary, no brainer. I hated the Clintons from the start.
Yeah.
So I mean, but basically, you just because somebody isn't saying the same things you want to do, you have some benefit. You're driving some benefit from them being around doing what they're doing, and that's what people don't want to. They fail to recognize that fact.
Yeah, it's amazing that we skip over the things that we don't want to deal with and don't want to. We don't want. A lot of us don't want to change our mind. We don't want to admit that we went down a road and that road was a dead end. We don't want to come back and then admit we need to go and change course. And this country's got to do a course correction.
Like with I'm pretty sure you've read the book or heard the book Ordeal of Change by Eric Hoffer. And people have it changes kind of a very
I have that book
prospect that's it's unsettling. Your cognitive dissonance and all this other stuff. And if you basically it's more people are going to be enraged once they find out what somebody's saying to them goes against what they've always been told, but it actually is true. They have anger towards the person who delivered that message.
Yeah, that's
but eventually
right.
They're going to have, after the shock wears off and the anger, they have to recognize and own up to the facts.
Yeah, John, what's the other book that Eric Hoffer has?
True Believer,
True Believer, that's right. The True Believer. Yeah, those are two excellent books. We have some dyed in the wool kind of constituents here, and we can't afford that at this point. We're at critical mass, and we've got to pay strict attention right now because the country's at stake. If we get this wrong, I don't think we're going to have another chance to write this course. If we get this wrong in November, if this can happen where what we see happening right now, where they're doing an avoidance type of campaign, the strategy is the same strategy they used in 2020, where they use the COVID, and I'm going to say hoax here, because I think that it's pretty clear now that this was a hoax that was aimed at running Donald Trump out of the White House. And in order to do that, they had to have some reason to shut the economy down. If the economy had continued to churn, it was churning, because the basic of Trump's policy, quite frankly, is the energy policy. He's talking about drill, baby, drill. And that's the key to whether or not the economy is going to be able to be recommitted to prosperity, to the extent we can have prosperity, given the amount of debt that we have. Because one of the things we got to have to deal with at some point, and I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, but you got a $5 trillion GNP, and you got a $37,000 billion debt, or 37. I'm going to say it's 37 trillion. They're saying it's 30, 34, 35. Okay, even at that number, you got a $5 trillion at the most GNP. So the revenue that you're taking in is in taxes is 5 trillion, and your debt is 37. Okay, 35 or 35 trillion dollars. And you're bringing in 5 trillion. Folks, I got to tell you something. You got a debt that's 7 times your GDP, and the amount of the taxation that you are raising through taxes, that debt cannot be paid off. Now I don't know what we're going to do with it. You can't repudiate it, because then you don't have any standing credit wise. Nobody will want to do business. All countries do business on credit. But if you default, who's going to trust your word that you will pay them in the future if you defaulted on your commitment in the past? Who's going to allow you to have credit again if you default on a debt that you owe that you didn't pay? How do you in fact deal with that in the future? Because nobody's going to want to credit you, because your word is not your bond, so to speak. So anyway, we're in tremendous hot water. But what I hope will be smart enough to do this time, having learned something from the 2020 election, where they hid out in the basement. Joe Biden said it was because of COVID, but really it's because of Joe Biden's dementia. And even though they were trying to hide it, let's be honest, most of us could see it. If you were looking, you couldn't help but see it. How could you miss it? The man can't find his way off the stage. He's constantly falling, riding a bicycle, trying to show how fit he is. And when he parks the bicycle, he falls over. You saw that, and they saw it in other parts of the world.
But see, the Democrats' only recourse saying he's not demented, he's a drunk. No, so we could trade one. Maybe that's just temporary, the drunkenness.
He was a star in private. They were telling us that we didn't see the real Joe Biden. Joe Biden in private was knocking it out of the park. He was so sharp, and Nancy Pelosi was saying his presidency is Mount Rushmore like. That's astounding. Joe Biden's administration is Mount Rushmore like, that he should be up there with George Washington. I got a problem with the ones up there with George Washington, and Biden belongs up there. I'm not for taking anybody down that's up there, but I'm not for adding anyone up there now that don't belong up there. Don't take any of them down that's up there, because I'm not for this statue pulling.
But yeah, they can have Biden up there, but his face will have to be facing the opposite direction. It's just like him; he's always trying to wander. He doesn't know where to go on stage. So
I don't know what part of that mountain he goes on. I mean, he doesn't belong with Washington. I can tell you that. But we got to look. We got to get serious. America, we're not a serious country right now. And this debate tomorrow, I'm going to see what happens in the aftermath of the debate. I can almost predict what's going to happen. They've been trying to hide Kamala. They don't want it in public. They don't want to unscript it. And they had that interview on CNN, and they can claim what they wanted to after the discussion was over. They're trying to act like it was hitting out the park kind of thing. There was a terrible display of nonsense, and the woman doesn't know what she's talking about. We have a vice president, by the way, that never hasn't had any real achievements. And I'm not knocking anybody's private life. Your private life is your private life. But when you use your private life as a way of promoting yourself in the political arena, that becomes an issue. That's a public issue at that point. And there's no question about the fact that the woman was, in fact, using her affairs as political alliances. Because if Willie Brown had not taken on his wing when she was 29 years old, which really launched her political career, because one thing about Willie Brown was that he was able to do a lot better than they're doing in California right now. He was able to invite some of the best minds in his administration as a mayor and then Speaker of the House. He was partisan, but he wasn't so blind in his partisanship that he was not going to recognize talent on the other side. That's why I was glad, by the way, that I was glad to see Robert Kennedy understanding that he had no shot. Those numbers are not going to change, and he's not going to be a player in his own right as a candidate. He can do a lot of work as a supporter of a candidate, because the candidate name still resonates in the Democratic Party. Everybody can relate to John F. Kennedy, although I don't know if they know a lot about John F. Kennedy's record. They know a lot about him because of the assassination of the president, whose largesse grows by the day, because once we have modern presidents, we make them greater than they were in real life. But let's admit here that when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joined the Trump team, I would have had a different strategy of how you play it out, but it did bump some numbers, smaller than it would have been if they played it a different way, but it bumped some numbers over in that count. There are a few more persons that are a little bit more at ease with being in that party with the endorsement of Robert Kennedy. I would have suggested that they stay in the third party statute, and then that would be a pulling of votes out of the other liberal camp and lessen those numbers, because that's how Trump won, by the way, in 2016. Hillary Clinton got more popular votes than Trump did, but the pulling was the electoral vote. And Donald Trump, I think you remember correctly, got 302 electoral votes. 300, I think it was 302 or 306 electoral votes. And that was because the electoral votes were downsized because of the third party candidates. There were a number of candidates. I don't know if without that, I don't know if he gets in there, since she had won the popular vote. I don't know if that would have made the day. It certainly didn't hurt him to have the endorsement and have Robert Kennedy coming over there, because the Kennedy name does resonate. But I think the better strategy would have been to continue the third party thing if you want to help Trump, and then go at it in that way and let Trump do what he got to do with in terms of solidifying the Republican Party. I got to make a prediction here as well about something. You saw last week where Dick Cheney came out and has endorsed, now get this now. Dick Cheney came out, this is vice president under George W. Bush. He was George W. Bush's vice president. And last week, oh yeah, these are conservatives now. These are people that say that they are conservatives. They're people that ran as conservatives in the Republican Party. There's nothing conservative about what Kamala Harris's record indicates. There's no conservatism anywhere around this woman's candidacy. And how is it that a conservative comes over and endorses the most radical presidential candidate in American history? How did that happen? And the question for the country is, are we going to let the country down by letting them get away with this? This is a charade, and it's been exposed now. Donald Trump, having won, called them out. I wrote about this today in my post. You should read it, because nobody's saying what I'm saying on Facebook. They're not making these points. And what I was saying on my Facebook post today is that I was making a reference to the Dixiecrats and the Democrats. Malcolm X had made a point where he said a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise. Well, here's what we found out with Donald Trump. The Republican Party leaders are nothing but Democrat Party leaders in disguise. If that's not true, then you got to explain, Ricky Recorder like, you got to explain how, when they thought that Donald Trump was done, all these suits against him, all these trials that he's going through, you would have thought that they would have surrounded the wagons around the presidency to defend this president. They were looking at it as an opportunity to take him down further. They thought he'd been so wounded that he could not recover. And look at all of them that were running against him in the primary, which he had to sit them down again And once he did that, all of a sudden they're talking about how much they love the man. I wouldn't give a dime for a donut for any of them. And that includes Tim Scott in South Carolina. And I know people think that Vivek Ramaswamy is great. He's a very smart man. I don't trust him, not as far as I can see him. You know, loyalty has to count for something. I know politics is a kill game, a kill some bonum game, but you have to have some integrity. And when you do things like what they did during this time period, the man is down, you're then kicking him while he's down, and you're just piling on, and you're not trying to defend the person because what they're doing to him is wrong, and much of it is illegal and unconstitutional. I'm saying that no matter what the other scholars are saying. I'm saying that much of what they're doing is unconstitutional. That right there, if you're not going to stand up based upon that infraction, that turns me against you, because if you're not down with the enforcement of the law, which is, I'm saying here, the highest form of the law, the Constitution of the United States, because you cannot do the things they're doing against a sitting president, whether he's sitting or not. If he did what you're claiming that he did while he's president, you're saying that while he was sitting president, you can do these things if he's not sitting. But he did it while he was sitting president. You can't try the president for that in these lower courts. You can't even do that in the Supreme Court. I'm saying that. Can't do it. What is this? You're going to dismiss Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution of the United States? How do you do that? How do you dismiss the articles in the Constitution? This is 1, 2, and 3, the separation of powers in the document. That's the first thing that the framers did. They wanted to fix what they found to be a problem under the articles, but they also didn't want to see the power going out of control, which the articles had in fact nailed that down, because in nailing it down, they simply didn't delegate the powers to the federal government and require unanimity or agreement of all the states that are acting independently as sovereignties, had their unanimity of agreement before you could amend the document. Well, that didn't work out that well. But you got to still think about how to chain down power, because that is a requirement. Power will go out of control. It always has, and it always will. And even when you chain it down like this Constitution does, look what they've done to it in terms of sliding from underneath the checks and balances. I was reading last week something that really just raised the hair on your back. Where the court has pretty much decided you can't do what Biden is talking about doing in terms of his loan forgiveness. The president doesn't control the purse strings. That's an intrusion into the Congress, the affairs that's delegated to the Congress of the United States. Biden trying to buy the youth vote, the college vote, with loan forgiveness. The president can't, you got to be kidding. The president cannot forgive any loans, and the court has said that to Biden. So now Biden is coming back trying to find a different way to do it. And they're saying that rather than a comprehensive writing off of the debt, they're saying that if the indebtedness is of this amount, then that part can be, forgiven. And they got other things they're trying to throw in there that would change, that seem like it's changing it, but they can't do that either. The Constitution is very clear about the purse strings of the country. The purse strings of the country, and they did it for this reason when they put it in the hands of the House of Representatives. They did it because The purse strings are important because they're digging into the pocket of the taxpayers. And if that does not behoove the taxpayers to go along with that, they pay a price for it instantaneous because those in the House don't have a 6-year term. Their term is 2 years. And if they do something where the memory of the voters is still in the frontal lobe of their thinking, they can get them to pay a price for it. And so it kind of holds them in check by the voters, because if you start raising taxes because you're doing all these crazy things with their money, they can then require some things of you because of that, require that you vacate the office. So when Biden when last week when Biden was trying to go around again, it wasn't really Biden, because I'll tell you this, Biden is on vacation now. Biden has already vacated the presidency. He just threw his hands up in the air and said, okay, they didn't force him out. That's what they did. They forced him out. And made Biden walk away. Now, some with some perks thrown in there and some things that were resolved to Biden's benefit that sweetened the pie a little bit, but they were not going to let Biden run, because Biden would have hurt not only the up ticket, but also the down ticket, all the ones that are running underneath, because 1/3 of the members of the House are running for re-election this year. And then they got to hold on to the Senate, and they just barely got a majority in the Senate. They may lose that. If this election, this is a very critical election, folks. If Donald Trump gets in there and the House is retained in the Republican Party's stable, and they hold on that slim majority they have in the House, and they have a slim majority in the Senate, you know, you have to watch that filibuster that Kamala Harris is talking about. She said that when she gets in there, she will get rid of the filibuster. I don't know how you do that. The filibuster is not an executive. They don't filibuster in the executive in the executive branch of government. I'm one of these persons that read the Constitution of the United States. These things are, you can't do some things in crossing over these lines. The people act like these lines can just be crossed over because it's up to your will to will it into existence. The Constitution prohibits this crossing of the lines. The separation of powers is very clear about the allocation of authority. The executive branch says in the first part of Article 1 what the executive branch authority is. In Article 1, the legislative branch of authority is. Article 2 does the same thing for the executive branch. They wanted to define what the roles are so you know where the lines are drawn. There's nothing left to chance here. It's very clear. The lawmaking body is a legislative function of the government. The enforcement of the law, that's the second article in the Constitution. That's the responsibility of the executive officer, the President of the United States, to enforce the law. Now, the president enforcing law can't go over there and then write it, because he's then taking over power. What's this, imperial presidency? You're taking power out of the hands of the legislative branch. That, to me, above everything, is that's a removal offense. Because one thing that the framers were trying to do is stop from having an imperial president. And that's what you would have if that happened. An imperial president. We have a critical election coming up. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And I know the nation's going to tune in tomorrow, because they won't have a lot of chances to hear what Kamala Harris has to say, because what they're doing right now is running the 2020 campaign over again. They're trying that strategy over again. They're going to hide her keep her from unscripted moments, keep away from the press, which has no interest in exposing in the first place. And they're going to keep her in these, they got these commercials on, and she stands up there and make these comments. People don't realize she's up there lying, saying that Project 2025 is a project of Donald Trump. She knows that is the Heritage Foundation, and Donald Trump has disavowed that, but she makes that comment in her ads, and nobody calls on it, so that stands as part of the record. They want to run the campaign that way, little sound bites. They don't want out there debating anything, because the woman really, Kamala Harris, is not very smart. She sounds like a third grader, quite frankly, because she's not that bright, and she did not make it. A lot of people don't make it this way. They don't make it on their merit. She made she made her career possible. Don't want to be unkind here, but she made her career on her back. And we have got to put a stop to these kinds of politics, because these politics are not helping us. Our nation is suffering because of this kind of political nonsense that's going on in this country. This country is being buried by it. You can say $37 trillion, but when I give you the numbers of each trillion, and you understand what $1 trillion is, you can see how out of control these politicians are. Every trillion is $1,000 billion. And we got 37 trillion. Okay, let's say 35. But that scale, that ticket counter is going up. And you see when they put that thing on the screen, it's frightening to look at those numbers, because that one column is just going like that, going out, it's just rattling off. And then over here, it has an effect. Then eventually it hits this column. I don't even like to watch it because it's so frightening to watch. But that's a reality. And that debt is sitting there because these politicians have in fact put this country behind the 8 ball. This country has been bankrupted. And now we're at a point where we're at critical mass. Are we there yet? Yeah, we're there. We're there yet. We're at the edge of that cliff, teetering, tottering, and wobbling. And it will only take a little bit of a push to push us over that cliff. We might have already crossed the Rubicon, to be honest with you. But if this election November the 5th is not Trump, because at least Trump has some business sense. He has a policy. But you're using shovels when that, we call that thing that caterpillar. He has a shovel, but what you need now is the caterpillar type things, because we've dug ourselves into a hole, and the shovel is not going to be able to dig your way out of it. It's going to take a lot of effort in a lot of years. We are bankrupted until this is down to the time of our grandchildren. This is a generational debt. Can I say that without anybody getting mad? This is a generational debt. But you got to start at some point. And I'm going to say this to the government. You're not going to fix this problem until you understand this problem is driven by the size of the government too. That's a big part of it. If you find any politician out here today that's not talking about downsizing the size of government, they're not serious. This government has, I was looking at the numbers 2 weeks ago, look at the numbers that are employed by the government. And you get different readings based on different people with different statistics. But it's bigger than Walmart. Walmart has 2.1 million employees. And the federal government has, one estimate is 2.95. That would include, of course, the military and all of the rest of it. But look how humongous, look at the draining of the tax base. Unless you can get the government down.
Like the thing is, there's a difference too. I've had a professor at U of M who was a psychology prof. He said about how taxation actually compels, creates jobs in the government sector. And I'm looking at him, and this guy's supposed to be this esteemed, psychologist. He has a PhD in it. And I actually told him bold-faced. I said, "Well, I'm glad you stayed with psychology because you don't know anything about economics." But it's like I'm just looking at this and going on about how you got a good-sized portion of the population extracting wealth from the other half to live for their very existence, increasing their pay rate whenever they choose to.
Yeah.
And the people, let's face it, how many of you do you sit around at night saying, "Gee, I really want to go get a permit so I can get my roof redone. So I want to pay. I really want that. It's a necessary thing so you don't get lawsuits against you or the government to shut you down or have your house torn down. So you go send it to get a building permit, right? A few $100s for that. You don't say you desire that. It's a have to case.
Yeah.
They create stuff we don't want to search out. We don't sit there and long for more red tape and more government interference in our lives.
Right.
That's what they exist on. They're very existence.
Yeah. You don't want what we want is if we don't get what we want in this case here, then this thing is already spiraling out of control. But we got to start reining it back in, and it's going to take a lot of years to do it. It's not going to be fixed overnight, and one administration is not going to be able to fix it, not by a long shot. But we got to stop the lying first. This is a generational problem that we got, and the politicians have got to deal with it in those terms and just chop at it and keep chopping at it, because you cannot allow, those of you who have these small budgets, you know this from your own budgetary concerns. You have to be able to handle debt so that the debt doesn't get out of control. Where the debt sits there, and by sitting there, it's not, the debt has already done the job that it was designed to do for the country. And that was, the debt was to do some things in the immediate time period. So the debt paid off the immediate things it was supposed to pay off. So it's already done that work. But then the problem is that they let it sit there and then add to it, just dumping more onto the debt. And now it sits at, I'm going to give their numbers. Okay, they say $34 to $35 trillion. But can you imagine $34 to $35 trillion sitting there, not doing anything, having already done the work it was designed to do by being borrowed into existence? Now it's sitting there drawing interest. And can you imagine what the interest is like on $34 to $35 trillion? Can you imagine what kind of interest payments you have on that? Look at your interest payments on your debt. You have credit cards. We got $2 trillion of credit card debt in this country because the economy is not churning. It's not growing, and so therefore people living on their credit cards. I think that one lady told me at one of the stores, I asked her about what kind of transactions they have in this store that are cash, and how much of the merchandise is sold on credit cards. I think they said at that time that it's probably about 68% of the person that pay on credit cards. I don't see anybody actually putting in the cash out there to pay off pay for their groceries, for example. Everybody seems to be paying with credit cards. Okay, that's well and good. But you have to know how to use it. And these politicians don't know how to use a credit card. That shows by the fact we have $35 trillion debt. $1 trillion of debt. They don't know how to use it. Now we're in this ditch, and every politician is running right now has got to have a business background and know what they're talking about when they talk about economics. It cannot be this kind of fluffy stuff that Kamala Harris is talking about. Kamala Harris doesn't understand anything about economics, and those persons in the Congress don't understand anything about economics. If they did, they would not have created this kind of debt. You have to know you cannot let $35 trillion sit there doing no work to advance the economy, but digging a bigger and bigger ditch for the economy to fall into. It's a trap the economy is falling into. And they built that trap over a long period of time, starting in 1913. Really, no country operates without debt. But what this country did that really got off the mark, so to speak, what really drove the country into this oblivion that we're in right now. This country's gonna be obliterated by its debt if we don't begin to understand what's going on. And that is they created their own bank in 1913 with the Federal Reserve. They created their own bank. And then what they're doing is that they are the checking. When I was in school, you may have had the experience also. In the first part of the school day, in the elementary school in particular, you would have a few minutes where the teacher would be allowing you to invest in savings bonds. Now, you may not have understood what that was really about. Of course, you're doing this bonds because by you buying the bonds, you were promised the government would redeem those bonds at a certain point with a certain interest in the bonds. But what you were doing, though, was loaning the money to the government. They were getting the money from the taxpayers. And that check and balance in that regard was in fact chaining the government down. But when they began to recognize that they could in fact borrow money into existence by creation of their own bank, and began more and more and more to do that, and then began to forego the savings bond. They don't even do that in school anymore. They go to the bank, to the Federal Reserve Bank, and they print these certificates, and then the banks go there, and after you print these certificates, it goes to the Treasury, and then the Treasury phones this out to the banks, and they put in the drawer of the Treasury an IOU. That IOU, that IOU means that this paper, this IOU, gives you license to take these certificates they've created called dollars at different denominations. They put out here in circulation. Oh, that's debt. I love it when these politicians tell me, try to fool me, fool us as American people, that China's loaned us money. They actually say that because they know that you don't understand how this works, and they tell you that we're in debt to China because China is loaning us money. Yeah, when? When they send that, on what cargo plane did they send it over here? What ship was that brought over here on? Where brink truck once it got into the country, and then what brink truck are we talking about? China's not loaning us any money. What is happening is this. Kamala, hopefully you'll get this question tomorrow. What is the national debt really about? The debt we have that other countries are holding. What is that debt? What is that debt? when you hear them talking about this is made in China, that's made in China, these things are made in China, what you're doing is that you're giving them these certificates of debt to pay for it, these dollars. And by buying their goods, because they're no longer a major manufacturing country anymore, the Chinese are making everything. They're holding the currency of the country. And the currency is the country's debt. That's a fact as much as I'm sitting in this chair. They're not loaning it. We're paying for products produced in China and give them the debt to hold on to it, an IOU. That's what we're doing. And those IOUs will be held as long as the dollar. See, they say as long as the dollar is strong. No, that's not only true. As long as the dollar is a federal international exchange currency, which makes them valuable to be held on to in other parts of the world. Because if you're not holding on to it, it not only creates inflation back here, if those dollars come back to these shores, but it creates inflation all over the world, where the dollar is in fact the world's international exchange currency. It spreads inflation throughout the world. But what's happening with BRICS is something that's going to change that. And that's what people are worried about. That's what Trump is talking about. He understands the implications of it. If they get out of the dollar as the world exchange currency, all those dollars, there's no reason to hold them anymore, because they're not going to be using them as exchange currency anymore. They're going to be using some other currency. Therefore, there's no reason for them to hold it in these places where I go when I travel. And then those dollars come back here because they're not worth anything abroad. There are a lot of currencies not worth anything abroad. I carried some currencies out of places where I was. I carried the CFA. CFA is a currency in Senegal. Also in the Cameroon, the CFA is a currency there. A different currency, but the CFA. The dollar C is a currency in Gambia. They have the Naira in Nigeria. They have the Rand in South Africa, been there too. And they exchange at different rates in different countries based upon how much they've inflated their currencies. The dollar C probably right now is like $61 C for every dollar. The Rand, when I was there in South Africa, the Rand was like 7 to 1. 7 rands for every dollar. It's crazy in Senegal, because in Dakar, it's so much paper that you trade for with the dollar exchange. The currency has been inflated, and that's what's going to happen here, because the U.S. is able to avoid that. It really is a Weimar Republic at this point, but it can avoid that as long as the currency is being held off the shores of the United States. And the fear is that those dollars will come home. If those dollars come home, then this is really over. And that's the 8 ball this country's behind right now. As long as they can maintain the lid on the currencies, countries getting out of the U.S. currency, as long as they can maintain that to an extent, they can hold on. They can hold on to some of the strength of the American economy. But once that happens, if there's this continuation of this exit away from the dollar, and they're developing an alternative currency, then that's going to create problems. And we must have somebody in there, not Kamala Harris. I can tell you that right now. She can't handle this. It's going to take a business person to do that. And that's why tomorrow night when they do that debate, I suggest you tune into it because we got to hear some answers here now. This hiding out is not going to work. We cannot allow it to be placed into the call for this time as a stratagem of getting someone elected to office. It's too serious. We got to have a debate about where the country is right now. This is critical mass because the country can no longer afford amateurs at the switch. And Donald Trump understands it a lot better as a businessman than the rest of them do. He does understand it. Trump understands drill, baby, drill, because the first thing that's got to happen in this country, quite frankly, you first of all get the downsides of size of government. You got to get that out of the way, and you got to begin to pay you got to pay down over time, and that's going to be hard to do. It's going to be very hard to do. You can't really at this point get to the principle, to pay on the principle, because what's blocking you to get to the principle is the interest, and you're paying on that. They're not paying anything on the principle, and by the interest going up, part of the interest is added to the principal in the next 3 months when they have the interest payment due again. That is some of the interest added into the principal, so that goes up, and it's just a mess that we're in right now. Is what I'm saying. This country is in a mess, and it's going to take some people to understand somebody better than what we had. They don't have economists in the Congress. They have lawyers, and that would be, I would be happy, a little happier if they understood that part of it. They don't even understand the law. They're sort of not following it. But look what they're doing with the economy. If tomorrow night in that debate, if that debate is not about fixing the economy, and not even fixing it, working on it, it can be fixed in a single term. It cannot even be worked on to the extent where it's going to make a difference. This is a generational problem that we got. If they're not talking in those terms that this is a generational problem, these people are not serious. It's a generational problem. I'm telling you that. This is a generational problem. You didn't get into it, Rome wasn't built in a day. This problem was not built in a day. This problem is a generational problem. It's going to take a generation to get out of it, more than one generation to get out of it. This is a generational problem. Our grandchildren will be dealing with this problem. And I can't tell you how mad I am at these politicians for having created this situation. I'm really angry with these politicians. I'm angry that they have gotten us in a position where we cannot even develop the infrastructure of the country. We cannot take care of the veterans of this country, the people that fought for this country, lost arms and legs in the country. We can't take care of them. And we're bringing these people in this country and treat them with kids' gloves as if these persons have contributed anything to the country, and treating them with the resources that should go to our veterans first and foremost of all the citizens, the ones who fought for the country and lost life and loved ones and things like that. Families lost loved ones, and they got their relatives out here scuffling, begging for arms to live. Towns of towers, the different groups. I finance to the extent that I can. I don't have a lot of money, but I can do $25 here, $25 there, and do some scatter things every once in a while. Of course, what happens there is that they got a list of names. They keep a bank of your names, and everybody begins to call. They think if you're going to donate over here, then over there. But there's so many different warrior groups out here.
Oh, by the way, we do have somebody at China. So it's been commenting here.
Okay.
Somebody else brought my attention to it. Peter John Lopez, and he says I'll go up to the top of the start of the comments.
Okay.
Everything Kamala touches turns to excrement. He basically turns to crap. That's what he said. Trump 2024 all the way. And then he says also, I'm with the convicted felon. That's Trump, who is an alpha male, not a performing monkey that loves his country, that he would die for its greatness. He's a genius as a businessman rather than a politician, who are destroying this country. And the socialist, communist, Marxist Democrats were trying to stop him forever since he descended from his golden escalator in Trump Tower. And I said, thank you, Peter. So somebody brought it to my attention.
Yeah,
we did
that's
get
good.
Comments. So
yeah,
we were getting comments, and I think you struck.
Yeah, that's good, John. See, a lot of people are waking up. That this is the trends are good. We just got to make it work, because they are. I wrote a column today, and I was saying here, what this forever voting is about. This forever voting is about what? What do you think this forever voting is about? It's about disenfranchisement of the voters. That's what it's about. There's no good reason to have the voting starting this early and going on for more than 2 months. This is September.
Vote early and vote often.
That's what they're doing too. They're voting early and they're voting often, and that's the intent. Throwing all these ballots out here, using COVID as a cover for it, and just throwing ballots out here and not watching where the ballots go, and people are signing them and sending them back in there, and there's no trail of who the voters are. This is deliberate. And the American people are going to have to stand up at some point. This is your country. They don't own this country. This is your land. This is my land. This is not their land. They are both parties. That's why I called them out today in my post. Both parties are guilty of this. 1,000 plagues upon each of their houses. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Neither party is worth, I said before, not worth 2 flies. I should have said 2 dead flies. Now, if one of the flies is alive, then if the flies are alive, then 1 fly. But 2 dead flies, because that's the kind of value of it. And that's only because of inflation. These parties are corrupt, both of them. And they know, the Republican Party too, they know that Donald Trump is an antidote to what they're doing. He's not going to be able to solve it by himself. No, it's going to be solved if he wins the election, which I hope he does win the election in November. I hope he does, because if he doesn't win, it's certain doom. The country's doomed. It's a certainty. Right now, we're at that cliff, teetering and tottering and wobbling. But if Donald Trump does not win, or let's say this is what I wrote about today in my post. Kamala Harris did not have to win the election to win the election. She has to be put in a position so that to give the appearance that's possible for her to win. And I'm contending here that that's why they get rid of Joe Biden. It was not his dementia. They knew he was demented before that. What that debate did, it made it impossible to hide the theft of the election, because nobody would have believed it this time. I didn't believe it last time. And I didn't have to have any machines and blame the machines for it. I knew the numbers could not be true, because you can't get an incoming president. They have 12 million more votes as an incumbent than they had when he ran as a non-incumbent and against the heavyweight at that time. Hillary Clinton was a heavyweight. Don't forget, they skipped over Joe Biden and jumped to the former Secretary of State and ran her in Joe Biden's place, because they didn't feel Joe Biden was strong enough to win the election in 2016. Get this man stayed out 4 years, didn't have any credential when he ran in 2020, and came back, and they say he got more votes than any presidential candidate in American history. And I'm contending here, that's impossible. Don't need a machine to go and blame for it. The numbers cannot be, you cannot imbibe the numbers. That anomaly had never happened before. And since Joe Biden ran under the ticket with Barack Obama, let's look at Barack Obama's number. He ran underneath Barack Obama. Barack Obama got 69 million votes in 2008. And then 4 years later, got 62 million votes. He went down by 7 million. You know, that's what happened to incumbents. Okay, and so when you are running on your record, your numbers go down because you got a record you're now running on. And that is true of all presidents. The numbers have gone down. Very seldom you see president numbers increase. Donald Trump got 12 million more votes and still lost. And I knew that could not happen. It was an anomaly that never happened in American history. And you can't find an anomaly like that anywhere that happens anywhere else in the world either, because people watch it. People are dissatisfied with the politicians. Okay, we've got a debate tomorrow night. Pay attention, folks. We got to get it right. We have to get it right now. We don't have any wiggle room. We're at that cliff. We're wobbling at the edge of that cliff, and we can be tipped over at any moment now. Debate tomorrow night is going to be critical. Watch it, and let's get it together, because November the 5th is a critical mass. Okay, I got to get out of here. Let me get out of here now. Want you to, of course, follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.